Mute all and then unmute Kim. All right, Kim, are you
I'm good. Am I good?
You're good. Okay, ready to roll.
All right. Good morning, everybody, and happy November. Boy, it's finally a beautiful November day. And I am about to take us through both Rodman's Hollow and the Black Rock Road Ridge. And it seems like every time I do one of these, I just keep adding and adding. So if this runs too long, I may cut it off and have to do part 2, but we'll see how it goes. We'll just see how it goes. So welcome to Rodman's Hollow and Black Rock Road Nature Preserve. Here's our map for the day, and you should not use this map for finding your way. It is general, but we'll be starting here at the overlook to Rodman's Hollow, and then we'll be going down to the entry to the Rodman's Hollow Preserve. This is the main Black Rock Road Ridge path, and there are, and there are any number of loops that you can take. So today we're gonna go loop 1, which I'm calling the green loop, and loop blue, which I'm calling loop 2, which I'm calling blue. Well, you get the idea. And then if I haven't tarried too long, we'll do the orange one. And it's really, which will come back here, and then we'll go all the way back down. So it covers quite a bit of geography in terms of different ecosystems. And, you know, even in the middle of November, I seem to find things to look at and talk about. So let's see how we do on this. So for beginners, here we are in looking at the original overlook, what I would call the original overlook of Rodman's Hollow, with this wonderful sign. More about lots of this as we go along, but Rodman's Hollow, if you can't read it, it says, "This land has been dedicated for preservation in its natural state through the efforts of the Block Island Conservancy, Inc. Please respect it so that all, human, creature, and plant alike, may share in its peaceful beauty." And this was the beginning of the Block Island Conservancy, and it was really, with a few exceptions, the real kickoff to conservation on Block Island, starting in 1972. Here's the overview. When I grew up, my mother always called this the Devil's Punch Bowl. I guess because it was a big bowl of geography. And when I look at this, I see how it has changed. It doesn't look so dramatic because so much understory and shrub has grown in. As I say, when I was a kid, this was all open fields. There were a few shad were coming, but a lot of the cherry trees weren't there. And you could actually see the path that goes through the bottom of the hollow, which you cannot see anymore. We used to scurry down this little ridge, which was quite dangerous and not to be done anymore. We'll be making our entrance just a little bit down the road. But one of the things that you'll notice that I often will say, oh, Rodman's Hollow, Black Rock doesn't really have a lot of trees, but in fact, it has a lot of trees, a lot of interesting trees. One is this giant cedar out here that didn't used to be visible. But this is one of the only naturally occurring birch trees on Block Island. Most birch on the island have been planted by their landowner. And, but that has always been there, at least as long as I can remember. And it's, of course, getting taller and taller. And in certain plumages, in certain seasons, the white of the birch bark really stands out. But it keeps getting bigger and bigger, and it's sort of a landmark in the hollow, in the Devil's Punch Bowl. So you walk down the road a little bit, and we'll make our actual entry into the preserve area, the Rodman's Hollow Nature Preserve. This is, as you can see from the sign, this is actually land that is now, part of this is now owned by, most of it, about 114 acres is owned by the Rhode Island DEM. And then the town of New Shoreham has management agreement and easements over it with the DEM. And then on either sides of this core 114 acres, there's land that's owned by the Nature Conservancy and the Block Island Conservancy. So this is really the poster child for conservation on Block Island, where the sum of the parts make the whole. And it's really a great sort of testament to how conservation has worked on Block Island. So, oops, wrong way. Into the parking lot we go, and technically this ridge that we'll start off is Black Rock Road. You can't really drive down it anymore, although this gate can be opened for emergency access. You wouldn't want anything other than four-wheel drive and high clearance to go down to Black Rock Road. Much better to walk. And if you may have noticed, well, let's see, we'll go to this very helpful kiosk that has all kinds of information that is good. One of which says there are to be no bikes, no motorcycles, and no horses. That maintenance is very hard to keep up. There's hunting in this area on the state land in February. And there's all kinds of helpful information, as I say. This we'll be looking at a little bit later. This is the Nature Conservancy map, which is a little bit truer than my map. So we'll see that in a moment, like right now. One thing, it was hard for me to draw my lines on my map because I couldn't really see the pathways because the brush from Google Earth was so thick. And I thought this loop was much smaller, but it's really much bigger. So this is loop 1, and it goes along, and then it goes steeply down into the hollow. And then this part is all in the bottom of the hollow, and then you come back up, a much easier grade coming back up this way. And then again, this loop, which is the second loop, come out to Black Rock Road. And again, loop 3, which will go up to this area, which is known as Plover Hill, and then back. But as you see, we could actually go another loop here. So you could go down here, you go down into the hollow and follow this all along through the hollow, and then come out and then come back this way. And actually you can come back this way, and this little, we'll have to add this little connection on the map because it is marked by a gate. So anyway, notable features is that the hollow is very deep. It's about, contrary to lore, it's about 13 meters or a little over 40 feet elevation at the bottom at its lowest point. And its highest point is up here at about 45 meters, if I remember correctly. And it's about 146, maybe it's 35 meters, 146 feet above sea level. So if you were to take the whole walk I'm talking about, you will be going from the lowest to the highest point in this area. So the low points are these darker colors, and then there are these ridges and open fields, and there's a rotational mowing in this area so that some fields are more open than others at different times. This is Long Pond, which you'll get a few views of, so I just wanted to note it where it is relative to our trip. And this is a path that will take you on towards Fresh Pond, and this path, when you start down, will take you towards the Turnip Farm Greenway. So you have lots and lots of options for short, long, difficult, easy walks in this Rodman's Hollow Black Rock Preserve. So as we start off, almost right away, we go down the path and we have our first chance to go astray. And this would be, if you take a right, you would be taking the path down the hill, which this is going down the hill towards Deep Pond. And then if you continue on, then you would come back up to the main road and the crossover and join the greenway towards Old Mill Road. But we're not doing that today. Today we're going on to, this is the main trail road, Black Rock Trail Road, and we're going to be turning for our first loop right here. And it's fairly easy to identify this place, not too far down the path, and you get a chance to take a left. There is a little sign. It's kind of pointed oddly, but never mind. But there is this marker in recognition of Nat Greenberg and Leo Nevis families' commitment to the long-term conservation of Rodman's Hollow. Well, thankfully, they sold their land instead of developing it to the Black Island Conservancy, and thus began the acquisitions of parcels. So the Black Island Conservancy was formed as a result of a threat to development in Rodman's Hollow. So thank you to the Greenberg Nevis families for selling their land to the Black Island Conservancy. So we're going to take a left here. Again, here's that marker, a little turnstile. There's a bike rack, just to remind you, there are no bikes allowed. And we'll just go right ahead. As we go down the path, one of the things you're going to hear me talking a lot about is the beauty of the foliage right now. We don't think of Black Island as having a great sort of fall foliage time, but when you start looking at the subtleties and the colors, I would argue that it's as beautiful as anywhere in New England. And you can't rule out that some of the most beautiful things are invasive. Here on our left is greenbrier, common greenbrier, and on the right is the berries of the bittersweet. So quite beautiful. Now, as you go along this path, you're going to come to you'll come to two choices to make a left. The first one is very near the path, near the beginning of the loop, which I bypass and go to this path, the second one. This is going to be a loop, and it's going to come back up at the first one. And this is a much easier way to traverse, because this end of the path, the south end of the loop, is steeper. The other, of course, you're gaining the same elevation or losing the same elevation, but it's more gradual coming up the other way and probably a little safer. If we were to go on straight, this would be going on to loop 2. But for the moment, we're going to take this left. And in this picture, there is another sign indicating how to go, but again, it needs a little attention. We'll get on that this winter, but we have just come out this way, and now we're going to take this left. And if right off the bat, the path is just carpeted with shad leaves, and I just cannot resist the pattern of the photos and the colors, and they're just gorgeous. And perhaps I should have reminded all that I have inserted in some of the photos as we go along a picture of an orb, and I have left an orb in along this one of these walks. So, but you'll see, I think there are at least 4 different photos that show orbs, just to add a little fun to your adventure. Now, as we go down, oops, I see now, I'll give you a hint, I see now that there are actually 5 images with orbs in them. We're going down, down, down the hill. This gets steeper and steeper as we go. Again, we see the patterning. This is mouse-eared hawkweed. It's not in bloom, but the little carpet of freshly green, little tiny leaves. This is a plant, as I often talk about, the plants of the Morainal grasslands, the plants that can survive in sandy, thin soil. And the mouse-eared hawkweed is one of them. So we keep going down to the bottom, and finally we get to the bottom and we start seeing it's like another world. And some of these trees are quite big. This is high bush blueberry. Because this form isn't quite right, I was questioning it, but it had leaves on it still, a little bit pockmarked, but I was able to, confirm the identification that this is a high bush blueberry, which usually likes wetter ground. And I think that's why, although this is done well, there's not a lot of water. That's one of the things about Rodman's Hollow. There is very little to no surface water, but there must pool enough to get at the bottom a few of these high bush blueberries. This one is a little bit more indicative of the form. And right between those 2 high bush blueberries, there was this, a hawthorn tree. And I was surprised to see it. If you have any questions about whether or not it's a hawthorn, you need only look at the thorns. They are quite deadly looking. But again, a beautiful, different kind of tree that I was not expecting to see in Rodman's Hollow. But as we go along, right now we're in the bottom of the almost the lowest part of Rodman's Hollow, and it's very otherworldly. Suddenly it's very quiet because there's no wind, because it's protected on both sides, very narrow hollow. It's protected on both sides from the direction of the wind. There's a lot of tall shrubs, and it's just very peaceful. This would be an ideal walk in the middle of winter, like a sunny winter afternoon. You would be out of the wind, the sun would be shining through, and when you're coming back up the long ascent, you would definitely warm up. So this would be a great winter afternoon walk. And I'm sure this would be a great place for bird watching in the winter. And I've neglected Rodman's Hollow for a long time because I think of it as, oh, it's just Rodman's Hollow. Well, you know, sometimes the common is much more interesting than you remember or thought it was. So I just love doing this walk. And when I started out, I thought, what am I ever going to say about Rodman's Hollow? And as I say, we may go too long because it was so incredible. But there we are at the back, at the bottom, and it's very peaceful. And you get this great view of the shad. Now, I wish I had done this walk about 10 days earlier, because most of the shad have lost their little golden or copper colored halos, but this one still has it. And you will see it throughout, that it's still lending some beautiful beauty to the landscape. But I just love that, that halo, that golden coppery color. And lo and behold, right near this big shad, I found another hawthorn, and this one was full of berries. Just a closer picture of the shad, just getting a color of that beautiful foliage. And just so you know, those are a lot of berries. Now, I can't imagine that there aren't birds that aren't wanting to eat these berries. And they may be too protected by the thorns, and they may drop, at which point they'll become great food for ground, lower on the ground for birds, and probably the manivole and field mice will love this. But this, I have never seen a hawthorn so full of berries as this one in the very bottom of Rodman's Hollow. Now, as we go, at this point, we're about as low as you can get. This is about the spot where it's 13 meters above sea level. And we're going to go off to the left, but if you go off to the right, you will be going to the path that connects you to the fresh pond area. And you go up the other side. We've come down the west side of Rodman's Hollow. This path will take you up the east side of Rodman's Hollow, and then into the Peckham Farm area, and then onto Fresh Pond, which is kind of where we start. I think our very first one of these Zoom on Natures was that Fresh Pond link. So we're at the other end of it now. And again, another sign that might need a little attention, but it does say Fresh Pond one way and Rodman's Hollow another way. Right across from this path over here is this beautiful high bush blueberry, another one, a younger one. I just love this because it really shows the form and what the bark looks like, this sort of interesting color. And this right here, this little shrub mess is this, and it's actually, you know what, I think if I get rid of that, I'm wondering if I'm covering up something. There we go. This is shad and high bush blueberry growing and entwining together right here at the very bottom of Rodman's Hollow. On the floor down here, lots of leaves. And again, these are beautiful, but not so beautiful. This is an invasive plant known as barberry. And it's just this little sort of salmon patch on the ground, and it's just a little plant. Here it is closer up, very distinctive, stiff little short leaves. Again, beautiful salmon colored barberry. But again, it is an invasive plant. And this are the berries for, this is a different plant of not so little. This is a full-on adult bearing lots of barberry berries. And this down at the bottom is just giant mats of decomposing mile-a-minute vine, another invasive species. So this whole area, like most of Block Island, is just a matrix of native plant species and invasive plant species. We are in a constant state of evolution. And just to show you a little bit more, see, you can, the barberry berries are a little bit oblong. And they also, it's a very thorny bush. You don't want to go in there. Again, I'm wondering who is going to eat these? Somebody must. All right, moving on. As we start going up the less steep hill back towards the beginning of this little loop 1, we come on another patch of greenbrier, and it's also known as catbrier, and I've also known it as bullbrier, but greenbrier, common greenbrier is the correct title. And you very rarely see greenbrier with berries, but every once in a while you find a set that is bearing, and I found a good one. And you can see these berries, again, berries that are lush and multiple and are surely going to be food for somebody and something. These, if you're familiar with greenbrier or catbrier, you know that it too is very thorny. Here's one sticking out there. So it's hard to stick your hand in this mess to get a photo without coming out scratch free. I'll leave it at that. And here's a good view of it as you would see it. Just a tangle. This stuff is so strong. Again, an invasive plant. It's a real tangle. You could put a board on top of this and sit on the board and it would not compress. But this particular patch is very healthy, very healthy invasive greenbrier with lots of berries throughout. And almost to the end of the path where we'll rejoin the main path is this little walkway. And I took this photo because it just looked so New England-like. This reminded me much more of New England than of Block Island. When I got back and started looking at the photo, I noticed that this tree looked a little different. I'm pretty sure this is a birch that has started up, and that these are all shad. And you'll notice the birch still has leaves on it. And when I went up to look at the leaves, you'll notice on this leaf it's toothed. Well, that's not what shad leaves look like. And I looked it up, and guess what? That's what birch leaves look like. So in this little beautiful little walk, we have, I think, a new birch growing up, and a lovely walk. This is just so beautiful. And because it's not the switchback of the first part of the loop, this is the easygoing part of the loop. So we come out, and we will, as we come out of that path that we just left, we'll take a left and retrace our steps down, and then we get to the same point where we could go left into Rodman's Hollow, or we could go straight into what I'm calling loop 2. And if we do that, we'll find the path is much more like this, much more open. The vegetation is much more shrub-like, not so much trees and overtowering, a lot of understory. And I came up the path this way, and I turned around, and I'm like, wow, I'm feeling a little bit like there's nothing here of interest. I came up path, turned around and looked, and I go, oh, there's a cedar tree. And I walked right by it without noticing it until I turned around to look at it. And you will notice throughout the rest of the walk that there are lots of big cedars in this area. So on we go. Again, just noticing the foliage colors of Block Island in Rodman's Hollow. Shad on the left, arrowwood on the right. Leaves are different shaped, leaves are different colored, but nonetheless quite beautiful. And same here with the long view across the top of the shrubbery. This is bayberry. which you can find bayberries. Some bayberry are still green, but this one has gotten its fall colors. And then some shad peeking out here and there, that coppery color in the distance, and then a big branch, and there's lots of this, of bittersweet. The berries have opened now. They were yellow, of course, in the early fall, and now they've popped open, split open their yellow outer husk, and are now quite red. So bittersweet, a nasty invasive, but nonetheless beautiful. Lots of red maples along the path. They tend to be, usually there's several trunks together, but again, checking the leaves below, without a doubt, a red maple leaf. But almost the maples are down, and because it was such a dry fall, none of the maples really had much in the way of good foliage. Although I noticed there's a good maple going down the neck by the Hobie house, and thus I digress. Again, the view, this is the long view. We're a couple of ridges away from the main Black Rock Trail path, but you can look over we're high on a ridge, and there's actually several ridges. There's the hollow, and then to the west, there's another ridge, which is what we're traveling on. And then to the west of that, there'll be some open fields, and to the west of that will be the main Black Rock Road trail. This is a long view looking at Long Pond. But again, it's this is just more about the just the view and the beauty of the texture, the colors of November in Rodman's Hollow. As we go along the path, we come on a very different landscape. This is a little Morainal grassland knob. Morainal grassland is characterized by very thin, very poor, nutrient sparse, no nutrients, just sand, coarse gravel, and very specialized plants live in the Morainal grassland ecosystem. Which is an ecosystem, a community type of vegetation that is actually considered globally imperiled. There are very few Morainal grasslands left. This is what it looks like from afar. Again, it's characterized by very thin, gravelly soil. Here's a close-up, and look, this is soil. It's like coarse sand, and only specialized plants can grow in this. One of which is this greens rush, and usually most rushes you find in wetlands, but there are a few that thrive on dry soil, and that's this one. And then also in the same, there's lots of this throughout, which is called broom sedge, and it's not really a sedge, it's actually a grass. Here is a little bit closer of the greens rush and closer of the broom sedge. And again, this is a grass. I don't usually put in the scientific names, but I did for one reason. This is Andropogon virginicus. This is very closely related to a plant well known in the Morainal grassland systems known as little blue stem, which is also an Andropogon. So it's just a different species, and these beautiful little tufts, these are the grass flowers, and at the bottom of each one of these little soft, fuzzy flower of the grass is the seed, and it will go to seed. Most of these grasses that thrive in the Morainal grassland are tuft flowers, tuft structure. And this helps hold the soil and make soil for the individuals within the group, and really helps maintain that ecosystem of the Morainal grassland. So throughout this area, you come on these little knobs, these little hillsides that are exposed Morainal grassland systems. But on we go. And as we go off of that knob, you come down a little hill, and suddenly you find yourself in a big field. beautiful field. Again, the texture, the color of mostly goldenrods and some briars and things like that. You can see the arcs of the dewberries and blackberries. And if you continue on the path this way, we will actually be going uphill over another ridge. These are small ridges compared to the going from Rodman's Hollow bottom to Black Rock. But you come to another chance to take to make a choice. And if we were to go to the left or straight, that would be going on and going back down into the hollow and coming out at the very south end of Rodman's Hollow. But for this walk, we're choosing to end loop 2 and headed back this way towards Black Rock Road. Can't get there without couldn't resist. Beautiful stately maple just overseeing the way. I can understand how Native Americans thought of some trees as guideposts and friendly beings that are telling you, yes, you're in the right way, keep going. And then you'll come out this little opening and join up with Black Rock Road Trail right here. So we're coming out of a more shrub land, more shrubby land into a more open areas of this trail. We'll go a little bit down the trail. As we came out of that opening, we took a left and we're headed towards the bluff. And along the way, you see some more trees, very healthy black pine, and with its many, many cones just opening up to release its seeds, which are all hidden in these. So as each one of these opens up, the seed can pop out. And next to, and not exactly entwined, but in association to the black pine, is this cedar. And it too will have some berries eventually, but I didn't get any photos of that. But they are a pair, a black pine and cedar pair. Keep going down the road, not too much farther, and you come to this intersection, which is where the trail that's going south meets up with, quote, loop 3. And that will take you up. So we've gone into the hollow. We've gone along the ridge, and now here will be an opportunity to gain elevation and go through some really beautiful fields. Before we do that, however, I'm going to go a little bit further down the road, and not too far. Actually, I'm going to go back for just a second. I was curious about this tree, so I just went a little bit down the road. I looked to the east and saw this spindly black pine looking east. It's quite in the distance, but I know this pine, this black pine. First, it's a very distinctive shape and probably won't be with us that much longer. It's quite spindly and quite vulnerable. But in May, it was the home to a pair of osprey. This was the first time that osprey were in this tree, and they did not successfully complete nesting, but they did make a full-on nest. She sat for a few days, but then they left it. Whether or not they made another nest or they're just a newlywed pair, and we'll have to come back next year. So I'm looking forward to next May to see if they've come back and made a real go of it. So on I went a little bit. There's that tree I was wondering about. I never noticed this. I've been down plenty of times and never noticed this big tree. Now I think it's because the foliage is off so many other things. It stood out, and I thought, wow, is that a big black pine? Doesn't quite look right for the cedars that are mostly there. So I looked a little closer, and I still wasn't too sure. Could it possibly be? And I looked a little closer, and I looked a little closer, and lo and behold, it was an American holly, which this is a big holly tree, to be right basically in the middle of the Black Rock Preserve area. So all through the winter, this holly will stay green. Hollies, as you probably know, are evergreens. And so even in the darkest of winter days and no leaves and no foliage, there will be this sentinel holly tree looking out after things. So I went back. There it is. That's our holly up there. I came back and I'm going to start the loop. And we're going to go up to Plover Hill. And as I go around that, I just came in, and you get a look at how the landscape is changing completely. This was mowed last year, so this is part of the rotational mowing. So this probably won't. I'm not sure if it'll get mowed this year or not, but it was beautiful when it was mowed, and it's beautiful now. So we're going to be going along the trail here, and look. We go along the trail a bit and just look back. At this point, we're looking back towards Cherry Tree Hill. This is the path that we've come. Here's our black pine and our cedar. So we've come around, and then we've come the path, and we stop and look. And this is a cedar. Most of the trees, green trees in the hollow, are cedars. Most. And we've come across the field. I stopped here and took the picture, and then I climbed up this little hill and got into another field with another beautiful view and fall foliage, and just really just taken again with the color and the texture. We're looking at this point towards Lewis Farm Road, right? So these are the houses that are along Lewis Farm Road. This is a telephoto shot, so it's making it look like those are much closer than it is. So we go along this path. Excuse me for a second. They don't call this Zoom on Nature with Coffee and Kim for nothing. So as we go along the trail, we see a completely different color and some very different textures along this field. There's several of these fields that we're traversing now, going uphill slowly. And this is sumac. And it's this wonderful band of sumac. Now, this was mowed last year. This is 1 year's growth. Last March, there was nothing here. So this is all fast growing material, and very woody and very beautiful. And along the same path, I found this little patch of wildflowers that are pretty much gone to seed. This is Pearly Everlasting. And something odd has happened. There we go. Pearly Everlasting. And this is a strand of it up close. So many of the photos I've taken on this walk are just for the texture and the beauty and the form of the plant. Here's one plant well past its prime, already set its seed, but I just love the way these leaves are curling back and around. Wonderful dried arrangements right out of our backyard. So Pearly Everlasting, not to be confused with Sweet Everlasting, which we saw in an earlier Zoom. Now, as we go along, we come to a point where we have to choose whether or not we're going to go high or low. If you go low this way, the path will be going along the edges of a couple of open fields. If you go high, you're sort of taking a shortcut along this stone wall, and it's a little bit more closed in, more like a shrub path. But it does sort of cut the corner of this big field. So I've decided on this day to go high. And one of the first things I come across along the stone wall is another holly, much to my surprise. So they are self-seeding out here in the wild. And if they can get a start without the deer eating them, they can get to be pretty great. Again, this will be more green in the dark and sort of drab of winter. Of course, I never really think winter's drab, but whatever. Nice green holly. Now we're getting near the top of the hill, starting to be able to see the ocean. It was kind of hazy this day, and you can't really see it, but I was trying to pick up the winter vines, which were out here. Try as I might, I couldn't get them on camera. But I started to notice yet another kind of tree. This is a black pine. And here it is a little closer, and there's another one, and go a little farther. get to a point where you can look to the west at the bluffs, and you notice all these black pines, and these are all very healthy black pines. As you know, black pines took a beating back in the 90s and were pretty much decimated due to the turpentine beetle. But the young ones that were still strong and healthy survived and have set seed and are being reestablished. This, this up here is a house that used to be known as Bill Lewis's. It's now owned by the McGill or Gill family. McGill, I think. Sorry about that. But they're all around the house. There are these black pines, and they're all in really wonderful, healthy status. And in those pines this past week, there were red crossbills, which is a rare bird, Block Island this time of year. Anyway, I digress for birds, of course. This is an interesting, just one more, interesting because this is vegetated, and it is a vegetated slope all the way down to the beach. Not that I recommend going down it. I absolutely do not, but because you won't get back up. But at this path, we're at what's called Plover Hill, and we're about the highest point. We've actually passed the highest point at this point in the walk, and but we're getting some great views of the bluffs. So we go on, and we've started to turn away from the west and start down this long, wonderful hill path that'll go to the end of Black Rock. And again, these are all open fields that were mowed last year and are just stunning now. Even though everything you see, almost everything would have been goldenrod, and in late September, this just would have been an amazing wash of yellow. Different shades of yellow for each of the different species. So just another view, just a little bit further down the path, just looking at this stunning view of Block Island and the various points and out towards Black Rock. You'd think I'd get tired of it. I never do. Along the way, about halfway, I tried to take this panorama. And you can probably, if you look carefully, you'll be able to see that this is actually a composite of two photos, because I wanted to try to show sort of the breadth of this view. And I couldn't do it justice. But again, you get some of the texture, some goldenrod here that's still very soft and woolly looking, but clearly gone to seed. This is the path that we've come down. Looking over here, you see this blonde little patch we'll see a little bit later is switchgrass, the panic grass, which I talk a lot about in some of my other Zooms. There are several patches of it out here, but there are so much goldenrod and other things holding the landscape that the switchgrass is not nearly as prevalent as it is in other open fields on the island. And just again, this is about the same spot, different lighting. But you get a sense of this wonderful sort of the texture and this softness of these goldenrod that have gone by and gone to seed. And down we go, and we finally made it to the bottom of Plover Hill, and this is where the intersection is with the bluff. The bluff face is right behind us, right behind the viewer in this picture. If we were to go this way, we'd be going along the bluff, off this way, and connecting into Black Rock Road, the old Black Rock Road that would take you out by Painted Rock. Quite a bit of hike, but that's where that would go eventually. And we're going to be going back this way over the Black Rock Road trail system. But before we go, turn around and take a look at the view. Again, it cannot be, it never gets old, even in its browns and grays. And the texture, again, the low tide, the sandy bluff, the clay bluff. And here you see how stony the upper surface is. And this is all glacial material that's been left behind and layered with the finer stuff on the bottom and the coarser stuff on the top. Never is it more perfectly illustrated than probably in this photo with the fine sand, the clay, and the coarse gravel. And if you take a close look at this, you'll see this, which is just, again, the texture of a clay bluff with these ridges and stones and water carving out. The finer material gets carved out, the more denser packed clay stays behind, and you get patterns that I think only a painter could do justice to. Turning around and going back, we'll go a little bit quickly back to along Black Rock Road, headed back to the main road. We've been following bayberries throughout the season, and here these bayberries are fully ripe and waxy. Some of them are actually gone. The wax is coming off of them, and you can see these it's like a basketball texture, right? Little studded pieces of wax. And if things get really boring this winter, I may attempt to make a bayberry candle. We'll see. Stay tuned. Just a little bit further, now we're going back north, right? So we've just come from the Bluff, which is right here. And this is the gateway that connects into the loop that we did not explore today. And this is what it looks like over here. It's just a gate. I'm sure this is part of the original Black Rock Road where you would turn and head towards what we technically think of as Black Rock, going out towards the road that is Snake Hole Road. And sometimes you find things along the path that are funny, surprising, interesting, and so finds, trailside finds. I have two. One is a sort of bedraggled, desiccating rat. I hope somebody got a meal out of it, but much more beautiful was this amazing, just little feather, dappled, as you can see, with dewdrops, and probably a belly feather from a gull. And so, from the ridiculous to the sublime, or the grotesque to the sublime, anything can be found along the way. I pointed out earlier the switchgrass tufts. Well, here we're getting a little closer to them, as with the path is now going, we were way up here looking back at them. Now we're going along the path, going by them. And this close-up will reveal that there are almost no seeds left in this switchgrass. Now, I imagine this get quite a bit of wind out here, which would indicate that the wind kind of beats them off pretty quickly. But the seeds produced by switchgrass or the paddock grass, very important for birds and for our small mammals, most specifically meadow voles and field mice. So switchgrass, beautiful tawny, almost a blonde tawny now, and it was much deeper green even in the summertime. Along the way, it did come across another great, some much larger sumac. It's a real tree here. They're usually, this particular species, I call it winged sumac. It's also known as shining sumac or dwarf sumac. It's not a giant tree like a staghorn sumac. It's more of a shrub, beautiful color, a great plant for your yard. For one thing, the berries are great bird food and quite dense, as you can see. By the end of the winter, these will be gone. The robins will find this, and in a day, it'll be gone. But it has this wonderful sort of form, these red leaves, and beneficial berries. Here's a close-up of the leaves, and the reason why they call this winged sumac is because it's these wings radiating off of either side of the main vein of the sumac. So you may have heard that sumacs are poisonous. Not all of them, and this one definitely is not. It's a very beneficial and beautiful shrub. I highly recommend it. Of course, as we go along, we continue to see different trees. This is winterberry, and this is shad. And in case you doubt whether or not this is winterberry, there are the berries. And winterberry is Ilex genus. It's in the family of hollies. So along the road, beautiful trees. And I needed to focus just a little bit because so many of the trees in the hollow and Black Rock are cedar. And these are big cedars. These days, it's pretty hard to get a cedar established because the deer do like them. And they often find if you get one established that the browse line is about 4 feet, and then it flourishes once it gets beyond the reach of the deer. My hope for this one and for this little tiny one just starting off is that there are enough other things to eat and they might escape the deer browse. But cedars are throughout, sort of polka dotting throughout Robin's, not down in the hollow so much, but up on the Black Rock Ridge and fields. Here we have another view of Long Pond, now from the trail. So it's a little closer. And again, this is shot in tight, quite, telegraphed in. Again, you get a sense of a little bit of haloing left on some of the shad. And but I much prefer, I like the close views when I'm bird watching, but when I'm just walking, I really prefer the long views that give the whole sort of texture, the goldenrod and some shad and, a little bit of evergreen and pond and reeds, and it just doesn't get more beautiful for November. Again, cedars. This is going along the road in 2 directions. This shot is taken facing the ocean, and this shot is taken coming back. But it's a very distinctive lone cedar tree up on the ridge as you go along Black Rock Trail. One of the last trees I noticed was again a shad, but this is kind of old shad, and it was covered with this, the branches were just covered with this beautiful green shield lichen. And you can just feel like it's a hand of decay coming in over. Lichen, as you may have heard me say before, is an organism that's a symbiotic relationship between a fungus and a green algae. The green algae providing the photosynthetic ability to produce energy, and the fungi the ability to break down the substrate and provide minerals. So always intrigued by the pattern and texture and color of lichens. And this green shield lichen was a particularly great specimen. It's very hard for me to get photos as we go along of birds, but the crows were pretty prolific, and the crow looks good in silhouette, so I wasn't too worried about not getting close enough. And actually, these 2 crows over here, these are American crows, although there was a fish crow calling in the area. These American crows had just taken wing, but this one was still looking back to say, what's the hurry? And then as we went, because there are no leaves and the leaves are all falling, you can really start to see nests from this past spring. And this is a robin's nest, which you can really tell because of the materials. It's mud and woven grass in the sort of the crux of the tree. So very typical robin's nest, of course, empty at this time of year. And I thought when I started this walk, well, I won't get a single flower blossom on this walk in mid-November, but in fact, I got a few, and pretty much some really beautiful ones, very sparse. There's only 1 or 2 areas where the dandelion was seen. And then I found this very, very tiny little Queen Anne's lace, just starting. Thought it might try it one more time, but it will die out long before it gets fully mature. Beautiful chicory and the common clover or the purple clover. And for flowers, you can't do much better than and then the primary colors right there. Oh, and that's it. We're on to our sightings from around the island at this time period. On the left is a hermit crab known as a broadclaw hermit crab, and it's out of its shell, which you hardly ever see. So this is its claw, and this is its long tail, which is usually curled into a shell. And right next to this particular animal was a moon snail shell, which I'm pretty sure it was trying to get into, but it was on dry land. So I actually picked it up and put it in the water and put it right next to its shell, and it started to move itself back in so that no harm was done. But you never see a hermit crab out of its shell, almost never. But you can see how it hooks in there. The shell, I think it must have been looking for a new shell because it was pretty tight quarters for the size of this broad-clawed hermit crab. This is the same species a little bit earlier in the summer, just to show you what it should look like. Here, again, a moon snail shell, and here are its broad claws, and its whole body is curled around inside there, as it should be. And then I mentioned before, red crossbills, a rare bird on Block Island in the winter. These are northern birds, but a friend of mine who spends a little time up at the McGills found this dead one at a window. So all red, it's a little mussed up, but no, never mind. The crossbill is a very interesting bird because it has these upper bill crosses over and turns one way, and the lower bill crosses under and turns the other way. And it's a special adaptation for pushing into pine cones. And then when you open your mouth, opens its mouth, it pries open those very stiff layers of the pine cone and gets the kernel or the seed out of the pine cone. Beautiful bird. The colors on its undertail covers were particularly beautiful. And even in death, it was beautiful. And happy to know that it was there. And I always have to throw in a bird. This is one of my favorite winter birds. It's the winter wren. Of course, it's in the hand because it had just been banded. And with that, I'll leave you with the bird list of my walk on these 2 days that it took to gather these photos. I think one of the most beautiful birds well, they're all beautiful, but I just love seeing the golden crowned kinglets, and they were twitting around down in the bottom of Rodman's Hollow, where it was windless and a little bit sunny. So with that, not too bad. I will, let's see. And I've been muted by the host, I think.
Sorry about that, Kim. I think you're unmuted now. I went to unmute everybody. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I have to figure out how to stop sharing. There we go.
Yeah, fine. I'm going to try to unmute everybody for real this time. So.
Okay. So that was actually perfect timing, much to my surprise. Happy to see you. And if people have any questions or comments, or happy to have them.
Kim, that was great. I loved all the focus on the different colors and everything, just the beauty of it. So thank you.
Yeah. You forget you can go out in November when there's hardly anything growing and still find beauty. So
I love the sense of wonder that you always portray, but especially in this one, the discovery, because obviously you had a certain attitude toward Rodman's Hollow, and you were so surprised and amazed.
Her name was Gas.
thank you, Suzanne. Yeah, and I'm delighted. I now can't wait to go back and do the other loop. I may have to add the other loop heading out to the other entry for a later Zoom on Nature with Kim, maybe in January.
Great, because we do have one coming up in December, right, Kim? It's Charleston Beach, and what is the date?
Beach. You know what? I don't know.
I'll let me see if I can find it.
It's
Sorry.
Charleston Beach and Cormorant Cove and the loop around the Coast Guard station.
I believe it's December 14th.
Okay.
Is the
And
date for that.
And we were just getting a cue from James Berry. Thank you.
It's my birthday tomorrow. Can you all say happy birthday to me? Because I'm all alone.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Birthday to you.
Happy birthday. Happy birthday, dear Suzanne. Happy birthday to you.
73.
Happy birthday to you. Well, that didn't really work.
Can't see your head, Suzanne, just the top.
I know, it's because I have an ugly face.
Oh, Jesus.
Don't believe it for a minute. All right. Any other questions or, I'm always looking for ideas now. This is, I don't know, our 10th, 12th, I don't know. So I'm looking for, if there are areas of the island that you think you'd like to know more about. I'm always up for suggestions. You can email me at kim.gaffett@tnc.org or in any way flag me down.
Kim,
I'd like to ask,
would you have all these other ones archived?
Yes, they're all archived, and I'll let Charlotte talk about that.
Yeah, no problem. We have them all on our website, which is natureblockisland.org, not nature.org. I'm going to type it in the chat, and you can, if you click on the Zoom on Nature, all the old ones are there from the whole summer series.
Block Island, natureblockisland.com.
I just put it in the chat.
Oh.
It's natureblockisland.org.
Org.
Org.
Oh, org, yes, at the end.
and then you click on the yellow warbler.
Correct. Suzanne's been there and has noted some errors, so I'll fix those.
But I also ask another question about the map in the beginning.
Yep.
Pond that you're labeling Deep Pond, and
Yeah.
I believe that's the pond I used to own. Yes, but
Call
that's
what?
not Deep Pond. Deep Pond
the
is the
one
one
in
that's
the,
next to the road. I think the map is wrong. I don't think Deep Pond is next to the road.
Right. I think the pond in the map, I think, is labeled Long Pond.
But you also label something Deep Pond incorrectly.
At the very beginning, I said the path goes towards Deep Pond.
If you could look at the map, the TNC map.
Okay, I'll look at it. I'll make sure it's right.
You're not going to show it. Okay.
I don't, maybe I can, let's see. Let's see, share screen. I'll go back to that one. I will attempt to go back. You think it was a TNC map? That's wrong. Let's see.
It's like the second or third.
Yeah.
thing.
Coming, here we go. I think this says Long Pond.
And
But you have this labeled.
Oh, I
Deep
see.
Pond.
Where Deep Pond is really over here, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I think you're right. We have the wrong pond labeled as Deep Pond. We have some work to do.
we definitely do. I'll make a note of that.
Yeah.
Well, I kind of donated that pond, that one.
Yeah.
The big one. Yeah.
The big one?
Yay for me.
So what is the name of this pond?
I don't know. I was just corrected by other cab drivers that I did not own Deep Pond.
Well, cab drivers aren't always the right source. I've learned my whole life that the bottom of Rodman's Hollow is below sea level, where in fact it is not.
The Deep Pond is one of those things that comes from underneath, from the aquifer, right? Yeah.
I'm sure it does, yeah. It is a very deep pond, and I know that I have been treated to the collection of a water snake from your son out of that pond. All right, anything else?
Well, thanks, Kim. This has been great.
Enjoy the day.
Thank you, Kim.
Thanks everybody for joining us.
Thanks,
So many
everybody.
wonderful things, so many.
And thanks.